Economy today work with enabling a sustainable lifestyle for all. And we do that by providing digital tools that allows you to track, measure, engage, and act on reducing your footprint, primarily on carbon emissions, but also looking at other impact factors. Yesterday was the World Oceans Day, and a year ago on that day we launched a water component as well, measuring in every transaction the carbon footprint as well as the freshwater score. And why is that important? I think we are seeing a carbon tunnel vision, and we need to also be mindful of other factors that has great impact, looking at water biodiversity, circularity, and everything else that goes into the mix. So that's what Decoupling do. We work out of Stockholm. We just opened up our first office outside of Sweden, and we decided for Tokyo, as you do.
Well, that is a great story, and I actually have one question. One thing that strikes me when I look at the economy is how well you communicate about decarbonization, about changing habits to your end consumer. But I also know that you work with big financial institutions. So how easy is to convince these financial institutions to take a look at this matter seriously?
Did you say easy and financial institution in the same sentence?
I know,
only you can do that. So, I think there's a blame game, and there's been a blame game for quite some time. Like, is it the producer or the consumer? Is it the people funding or the people getting funded that drive impact? And I think we need to look ourselves in the mirror. We can go to work and wear one hat, and we can go to the party with our friends and wear another, and we can go to pick up kids, or we can go visit our parents. We can wear many different hats. But at the end of the day, it comes down to what we do as individuals. To me, people are the cure. And that's why I'm also very happy to be here today, because it's obvious that when we meet, also with big financial institutions, when we meet the big financial institutions, and they go like, oh, carbon footprint, we don't want to be part of it, let's not touch it. And we say, but we can help you track, measure, and engage your users so that you get a solid, loyal engagement out of your relationship, and you help them understand and engage. Then they go like, but how do you mean? How would it work for me? And that's always where they go. So if it was me, how would it work? And all the big financial institutions today, so far we have robo-advisors, but there is not so many robots yet. There is still a lot of people, and they are interested in helping others to reduce their impact. But I think we need to tell everyone a secret of ours.
What is that secret?
1 year ago we met at South Summit.
Exactly.
The first time.
That's where it all started. So I work for City Ventures, and we invest in startups in fintech, enterprise tech, and commerce space. And we have been looking to back a company in climate fintech for a long time. And we knew that we only had one shot because of our investment committee says we can't invest in competing companies. So that one shot was used for the economy. So we are proud investors in the economy. But I wanted to talk a little bit about how investors are now looking at ESG space, because last year there was so much interest in ESG and decarbonization, and every big financial institutions came up with crazy targets in terms of dollar amounts, but also in terms of years by when they will reach those targets. But I feel like at the beginning, first half of this year, we had so many events that have kind of taken priority and paused that ESG focus, because everybody needs to deal now with hiking rates, potential recession, war in Ukraine, and it almost feels like it gave excuse to financial institutions to deprioritize ESG for the time being.
But as an investor, and from personal experience, I know this. It's so important who you get on board and what conversations you can have. Directing funds into innovation, into sustainability, into integrity of keeping our planet is going to be critical. And you represent a lot of money. You're like, woo, that much money. How with the macro environment that you describe, which is tough, and it's going to get tougher for startups, it's going to be super tough. Is there any observation or in regard of decarbonization and contribution to ESGs, is there any advice or any observation that you would like to share?
Yes, actually, I think with all this noise, kind of the solutions that the Citibank and City Ventures is looking for is actually something that can cut through all this noise and give some clarity. And I think everybody kind of came up with these great targets and commitments in the likes of trillions. And I think every single bank on Wall Street committed to some kind of big amount to go into reaching these aggressive targets. But there is a lot of greenwashing happening, and what we are trying to look for is companies that are using new technologies like blockchain, artificial intelligence, natural language processing, satellite data to help us actually cut through the noise and give us clarity on what companies are actually doing in this space, who is on the track to reach their targets, and who is actually lagging, because with the lack of regulation, regulation is still not there to regulate this space entirely. So there is a lot of space for companies to write what they want in their sustainability reports. But with startups that can actually use this alternative data to verify the self-reported data, we think that's quite an interesting space.
I love it. And to build on the greenwashing side, I don't know about you guys, maybe you have a different opinion, but when I went to COP26 by train, I mean, wow, you can't really fly to an environmental conference. It's like, so I went to COP26 and there was a lot of claims, many claims by big banks, big financial institutions. So I think what we're seeing now is we're migrating from greenwashing to claims washing. And at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, we will see who's walking the talk and who was just throwing a party in Glasgow. And I think that's going to be extremely interesting. And that, to your point, I agree, startup has a role to play to call the bluffs, which is the negative reading of it. The positive reading is to support the ambition to reach net zero and to hit the 50% reduction target for 2030. So I think that's a very interesting time to be alive. But with the macro environment, out of a startup perspective, the macro environment now is tough.
But can I just talk about one more trend that I've been seeing?
Yes.
And that is the decoupling of E and S and G. I feel like the financial institutions came to the point where they, and not just financial institutions, actually Tesla is a great example. Great score on E, horrible score on S and G, right? But if you wrap it together, they might seem better than they are or worse than they are. So what we are seeing now is the coupling of these three areas, which are big in their own rights, and they need separately dedicated funds and people to solve E, to solve S, to solve G. So, and also what we are seeing is the broadening of that E and the broadening of S and broadening of G. And to your point, how you have the water index, how everybody's now looking at biodiversity, you can't put E just, you can't peg it just to carbon. There's so many facets to it. So we are also looking for solutions that can help financial institutions assess biodiversity.
I love that, and I think it's, if we look at the S, for example, I think it's naive to believe that we can address the environmental crisis, the lack of biodiversity, the marine life being eradicated, the livestock replacing all of the wildlife. I think it's a tough call to go like, okay, we're going to look only at the environmental topic without addressing the social component. If we're looking at the top 20 of the world, having 90% of the carbon footprint, looking at Africa representing 3.8 of the global carbon footprint, how can we avoid looking at the social component? We have seen a lot of big companies putting a lot of efforts into financial inclusion. All good, financial inclusion, good thing. We need to start looking at climate inclusion. We can't leave anyone behind. We need to cater to the weakest link. We need to see language, data substantiated language that drives insights and understanding, that triggers actions, collective, collaborative action, a language that everyone can understand. Sometimes when I read sustainability reports, I'm like, what the fuck? I don't understand it. You know, what is this? I need to know. Can someone please tell me what I should do? And I think that's something that I'm afraid of, that we see a social or environmental elite using governance structures to get ahead of the pack. And that's also somewhere I think startups and places like the South Summit has a role to play. Is there any other trends on the horizon that you see out of an investor perspective?
Yes, so one area that we also would like to spend more time, and that is one thing that you mentioned, how do we translate the sustainability jargon to everyday people who are not sustainability experts? And I honestly do believe that companies like Decoupling are doing an amazing thing in actually making care about the climate a cool thing. And not to mention the 3 Cannes Lions that you won for the amazing efforts in that space. But you've also launched a lifestyle calculator, which I believe is a great tool for people to assess their carbon footprint, but also get insights on what to do once they assess their carbon footprint, right?
No, thank you. So what we have done, we've been eating our own soup a little bit too much. So we got a little bit naive in our thinking that everyone wake up in the morning thinking about their carbon footprint. Doesn't happen. You know, I can call my mother and I can say, what happened in Glasgow? This year she was actually like, well, I think it was quite interesting what India did at the very final hour. And I'm like, okay, this is actually a topic that everyone is now aware of. But we realized that in order for bringing everyone on this journey, we needed to educate everyone in a consistent fashion. So together with the United Nations, we built the Lifestyle Calculator, which is a super easily accessible online tool. You can all try it, and you can assess your own carbon footprint. You can go through the UNFCCC, or you can go through Decoupling. It's for free, and it's for free for everyone. It's for free for every organization in the world that wants to provide this. We provide it as an API. You can do it to engage all of your members, your users, your consumers, your friends, and you do it in a comparable way. Because comparability is critical. If there is no comparability, it's only opinions. So I have an opinion on this, and you have an opinion on that. But if we have consistency, if we have comparability out of an individual perspective, we can have the conversation that is needed with each other and with our children. And we can also, out of a corporate perspective, we can compete. And when there is comparability and there is competition, there is a winner and there is a loser. And in business, if there is winners, they are making money. And if we can making money catering to the needs of the planet will be saved in no time. Actually, Hugo Chavez said once, if the world was a bank, it would have been saved already, and then Bernie Sanders stole it and said, I said this. Maybe Hugo Chavez wasn't as popular in the US, I'm not sure.
And do you partner with other startups in this space? Because the way I see how we're going to reach how are we going to meet these targets is if we all collaborate together. Financial institutions, corporates, and most importantly, the most innovative startups that are trying to solve this problem. So do you partner with other competitors or complementary startups in the space?
Definitely. Collaboration is at the center of everything we do. This problem, it's a bit naive to think we can fix it on our own ticket. We need to collaborate with many brilliant people out there. I have 2 examples. You brought up satellite technology before. We just recently, about Sunday, it was World Environmental Day. So we launched in Stockholm on digital billboards all over Stockholm the real-time emissions data from satellite monitoring of Sweden as a nation, so that everyone could see if we are on track or not in regard of the emissions, which is pretty cool and a bit scary. But that we did with Kairos, based in France. It's a startup working with satellite data in regard of tracking emissions. And we're also bringing to the market in 2 weeks, it's not in public yet, but we're tracking together with Seen This, which is a data streaming company reducing data waste with 60 to 70%, and we're calculating the environmental effect of data waste, because the use of data is skyrocketing. And if we can reduce the data waste of just the WordPress websites around the world, millions of websites, with 60 to 70%, I think we can go to bed quite happy that evening.
I had no idea there was such a thing as data waste, but it makes sense.
In 2 weeks it will be all over the news.
It makes sense. And then in terms of geographical differences, I mean, it's clear that Europe is the leader. And there is this Yale environmental index that is tracking how countries are faring against their commitments, against their targets, policies, and the top 10 countries are all Western Northern Europe. What is happening with the rest of the world? And now, especially when you open the office in Tokyo, how far behind is the rest of the world compared to the US? Us, Europe, not the US.
That's a very good question. I think it differs tremendously. So if I go to the services, the service we provide to the most in 32 countries today is our transaction calculations. And we see 2 countries in the world with 5 banks going to market with engaging their users, calculating the footprint of every purchase. One is Italy, and one is Taiwan.
I was not expecting these 2 countries.
No, but I think there's also 2 completely different trajectories. So one is within the EU, we see regulation being sort of leaders in regard to the taxonomy and the Green Deal in the EU, and we see Franz Timmermans, on a mission around citizen activation, which is all good. The EU, I think, is out of a regulatory perspective, they are going to lead the charge. But other parts of the world, out of a tech perspective and data perspective, will leapfrog the development that we are doing in Europe. So looking at what's going on in Mexico, in Taiwan, in Pakistan, in Japan, it brings hope to my heart, because it's obvious that there is a need for a global language so that everyone can compare. But it's also obvious that there is a fair amount of tech leapfrogging that we will see. Also in some of the African nations, my greatest concern would probably be, to your point, the US. I think there is a bit of ground to cover in the US in regard to sustainability topics.
Yes, working for an American bank, I have the pleasure of traveling to the US quite regularly, and it's mind-blowing how far behind they are, how this is not even a topic unless it's at a corporate level, because they have certain requirements and certain targets to hit, but from the perspective of an everyday consumer, an average American, they just don't seem to care. And I mean, who can blame them when every day they have shootings happening in the country and fighting for abortion rights and but not to go into politics.
No, but I mean, there's many topics that we need to take care of in order to leave this planet in a better state than we found it when we do so. But I think there's one thing that fascinates me, and that is when Biden re-entered the Paris Agreement on behalf of the US. He was asked, so why did you do this? Was it a hard decision to make? And he said something in line with, it wasn't as much my decisions as it was the banks forcing us to do it. So financial institutions can play quite a role when it comes to this transition to a net zero economy, I would say. Not only by directing cash and funding, but also using their weight in setting standards, in showing the way, and incentivizing companies, incentivizing individuals. So I think there is a lot in the making that is quite inspiring here in Spain. We have Santander, who has launched a lot of initiatives around the green opportunities. So I think there is a few leading the way, and I'm very inspired to see.
And one thing I would like to add, and not to brag, but Citibank has a female CEO, is the first female CEO on Wall Street, and the first thing Jane Fraser did when she assumed office last March was issue a statement how she's committing to solve this climate problem. And I honestly think we need a leadership change in some of these banks, and maybe, as to your point, kind of social and governance, there has to be diversity. There has to be diversity of thought. We have to have different, probably, leadership styles for these problems that we are trying to solve.
I agree, and I mean, a few years ago, it would be quite radical to say this, but it's obvious that the future is female. Men has been fucking up this planet for generations, so it's time to hand over, and I'm hoping that my daughter will be leading that charge. And that's the way it is, you know, just look ourselves in the mirror. I'm for one is one to blame. Is there any questions? We have 5, 4, 3 minutes.
No, just a comment. You haven't fucked up the, the planet. The textile industry is one of the most pollutive industries, and it's mostly women that buy clothes.
Good point. Good point.
I think you male are more climate concerned than women. Sorry.
I don't agree with you, but I think the fashion point is interesting out of another perspective, and that is, we need to see business model innovation. How can we expect old business models to solve new problems? You know, it's not, if a business model is based on just extracting what we claim is for free and sell it at a low margin but at great volume, that business model has to go. It has to go. It has to be circular. The circular economy is going to be here next week, and we're going to go like, how can we upcycle, recycle, and so forth? And I think, to your point, that is what I read into the fast fashion industry. They're doing many good things. I think they might be a little bit too slow, so you know, we have to show them the way as consumers, voting with our wallets every day. So stop buying fast fashion.